thank you very much for coming. And I will ask you first to excuse my modest English and my lack of talent, my lack of practice. Too many of my colleagues are aware of my infirmity. This asks me to look carefully at my papers. And this seminar will be augmented by alteration of my native Frenchman origin of the Shakespeare language. Sorry for that. But still, I will try. And the topic today is the preparation of the score in a process inspired by the rigorous work of the craftsman, deliberately distancing from itself from stylistic, contextual, emotional, and sensitive issues. I wanted to consider in this talk the pulse of our modern life, the hyperconnectivity, the overload of informations, the fragmentation of competencies, a fact following numerous studies which could interfere negatively in the learning process, the concentration, the dedication to a single subject. Let me share the personal remembrance of our winter residency in Odborough 30 years ago. We had the privilege to work frequently with the Borodin Quartet, preparing the cycle of the Shostakovich quartets. After the session, in this small town facing the sea, the phone call to the family was interrupted abruptly as the credit had been used up too quickly. Nothing disturbed us, and the distillation of the time shared with our teacher had full time to develop. The memory of teaching had time and place to spread in various parts of our brain as a deposit formed in a liquid by chemical precipitation. Therefore, the development of a rational, constructed, formulable, and repeatable process makes it possible and helps to reach more quickly the level of concentration necessary for effective learning. The brain then knows the subject on which it must focus and will organize itself to make it possible to value the time devoted to the preparation of these architectures that are scores. So, and in a quartet, each musician brings a specific background into the rehearsals. Their sensibilities, their knowledge and opinions may differ, which for the future represents an obvious arrangement. But this diversity sometimes leads to premature debates that slow down the work. And may I say that some proposals are not based on an intimate knowledge of the score, but rather on subjective impressions marked by the history and personal memory, including recordings of our predecessors, which are often at the origin of our choices of repertoire. This leads to debates based on arguments that are often emotional and not always sufficiently documented. And I speak by my own experience. The knowledge of the text resulting from the work on the table should avoid the lack of consideration of the other parts. But musicians' attention is largely monopolized by the instrumental realization of their own text. There is a risk that the first stage of the practice will be a simple progression of 4 parallel voices. The diversity of instrumental techniques is also part of the singularity of the personal history of the 4 musicians. The differences can also lead to sterile debates. Our habits encourage us, and sometimes a proposal is rejected only because it represents a change from our comfort zone. This is particularly noticeable in the bowing cuts between bass and violin. You remember? The answers we will attempt to give today are those. How to access to a careful discovery of the text and the connections between the 4 scores are contained in it. How can the musicians attentively collect the information and discover the connection that will allow vertical links to be created between the four parts? To define a method that allows musicians to work together on the same process, basing their learning on common basic parameters. To approach an attitude specific to scientist research, collection of informations, processing of data, observation of results, proposal, or conclusion. To choose a musician as a referent and give him or her reason within limits of that score allows this complicity and to build these connections. This responsibility will be given successively to each one. The musician in charge concentrates on the realization of his own score, attentive to the events in the score he must consider. This is a guarantee of the quality of his investment. The others will follow him in a mimetic way. It will mix the specificity of each contribution. There is a possible gain in efficiency. The different achievements of each person, the diversity of opinions, the different feelings, the richness represented by the achievements of each person will not interfere in this construction work. Exchanges of ideas will have their place later. The debates will start from a shared knowledge of the text, a precious basis to avoid the too rapid argumentation and too instinctive one. At the level of instrumental techniques, the sharing of experience will be more profitable than debates that are sometimes based on arguments attached to personal comfort. And for that, it's very important to know that mimicry is a fundamental mechanism of learning. I propose as a principle, I estimate the people with whom I have chosen to play in a quartet. Therefore, I'm not afraid of being influenced by their own instrumental technique. In the realization of the working technique proposed today, it is important to consider repetition as necessary. And I say repetition and not rehearsal, of course. Therefore, the score will be played over and over again. The practice, as for people, should find its place in the location that centralizes the acquired mechanisms. These mechanisms are based on the procedural memory. On a bicycle, for example, when you pedal, you don't think about your feet. What a freedom and what a security. Will I ever be able to follow one of my colleagues as naturally as I ride my bike? I would say yes. I would like to thank Julita, Veronique, Anse, and Philippe for agreeing to offer a preview of the method presented. Thank you for that. So now that was kind of an introduction, and we will retry with the quartet. You don't have any name, no. You are a quartet. A quartet to observe in a score what it is and how to build this connection between the four parts. And then we will have also, the idea will be to calculate the time it asks. And so again, I'm sorry because I will not speak about music, I will not speak about tradition, not about style, not about history, just concentrate on the construction of this edifice. My computer just is asked me to give the code again. And I'm sorry because I did underline some notes or passages, but it's not very clear. So we will start, they will play more than that page, with the quartet, and we will decide in a very slow tempo that one of the musicians is a referent. The others should play just following this person, whom I will not call a leader, because I think in a quartet we don't need leaders. We need to trust our colleagues and to be able to play with them, because when you lead, you lose something. And it's why very often we have to say that a first violin of a quartet is surely not a first violin of a chamber orchestra. So one of the musicians will be, when you have parallel voices, in charge, and also in the same way more concentrated on his own task. And the other will just, by a mimetical attitude, follow his colleagues. But of course, the scores give some more information. It's why I've tried to show the first bar for the first violin, of course, the first violin is alone. But then we will decide, when you are in parallel voice, the bass will be in charge. And regularly, because as you will see, this piece will be played often, we'll change this responsibility to the middle voice or to the upper voice. So I explain rapidly. First bar that you can see, of course, Julita plays alone, and then Philippe is in charge of the bass, and Ansel play with him. How to play with him, also not only by the ear, but looking, as mimetic attitude asks, and also I would advise to look at the tip of the bow, which gives a lot of information about the energy given by Philippe. We will start very slow, 50 for 1 beat, and I will try to be a very good metronome. I bring something for that. And we will try also to say to accept 2 sentences. First of all, we'll approach the length of the bow that we will use in the fast tempo, not to learn any mistake. And also, we will stay on the string. No one till now was able to prove me that we had again taking the bow out of the string. No bowings now, no respect, special respect about articulation. The first idea is to build this connection, to know exactly in an intimate way what our colleagues are doing, are playing. If I give the example of the 4th bar, you see a arrow going from the cello, I mean almost, to the first violin, because I think it's a need that the cello take care about here Julita takes care about the 3rd beat. She was already playing, and she should take attention to the entrance of the cello. Why? Because it will build a connection, and again I want to avoid this idea of people playing in a parallel energy but with no connections. And every time you can see when someone is coming from a silence or from a long note, when he somehow restart his playing or change the articulation, the others should collect the information. I should follow my colleagues. So in that way, we are approaching a process of collecting informations which will be used for our playing. And it makes somehow the time of working a process which is more like the scientific attitude when you prepare a subject. It's to collect information that will be needed to go to some conclusion or observations. So now we will try, and rapidly I will explain. I will start 50 for 1 beat. Sounds very late, but normally the musicians have time then to collect this information. So it's a bit new for you, and we spoke a bit 2 days ago about this idea of length. Also, maybe the sound will crack, but I think it's a good experience, because we don't need to have a nice and achieved sound, and it means that really the musician push and pull his strings, and I'm sure that we should more trust our strings to give us information about how we should play. And I can't imagine that I know kind of intuitively how I should behave with my string. So now I will be the metronome. I will put the light on. and you are kind enough, I'm sure, to start. It sounds a bit strange, but it's interesting. What I've noticed, for example, you are now have to go on collecting information and you miss some information. And each time you should be extremely surprised about what's happening. And also, for example, when you hear that you are playing in a parallel rhythm than one of your colleagues, you should directly turn to her or him to play exactly as he has done. And sometimes I have the feeling, Philippe, because you were very often leading somehow, but again, I prefer to say you were right, you were showing too much. And you can just play for you extremely well also when I speak properly in a good position, very comfortable. Then the time spent is also a time where each 4 times you have a very good occasion to have a very special relation and very concentrated relation with your instrument and with your strings. So, of course, again, for them it's very new, and we will spend time to search and maybe to find your own way to deal with this way. So the idea is then to change the responsibility, to go a bit faster, and to say, for example, now we decide that it's a middle voice who will lead, will be in charge, and if there is only 2 voices, we'll stay on the lowest one. And don't forget to be very careful when a new thing appears to catch it. And then you have maybe also to show, for example, tila lam when you come in. And these connections are, of course, very subjective. You can organize other connections. The idea is to be sure that when you play, you are extremely awake. And again, I refer to this idea of collecting information, which is the basis of, for example, in botanic experimentation, you need first to collect information before you try to make any conclusion. And sometimes I wonder what is research in music, and I remember the work of the platform in the time, and some of you know it well, and where we consider that it's possible also as a practitioner to make a PhD just based on the practice and on all the knowledge and experience and personal decision should be understood by the play and by the performance, by a photo, by a composition, or by a concert. It's why I really consider that if you are in this idea of using your time to collect a lot of information, you will earn time also because your brain will use very fundamental aspect of his way to learn, which is again the mimicry, and to use this procedural memory, which is surely, I've heard, with easier connection than the rest of our brain, and where all the behavior that you learned are placed in your head. So very good. Now we'll go on. I will give a faster tempo, but my metronome doesn't go very well. And as I have ears, I'm not a good person to. So I will go to this example. So that will be another place, but I'm sorry that it's not very well underlined. And I put some other arrows because now it will be the middle voice, but you will start from the beginning, yeah? It will be the middle voice who will be in charge, or the lowest one when there is only 2. But I've shown, for example, on the bar, the 4th bar of that page, that even if, for example, Julita, first violin, should, consider that Véronique is right, but in the same time, Philippe will play with Julita, with Véronique, sorry. And it's a good example because we may wonder if we have to play all with the person being reference, but when one is right, he should follow the person on dialogue, and the other one should stay with the same decision stated before I play on the lower or the upper voice. Why? Because I'm sure there is different way to play with someone. And that will be very important, for example, in the quartet. Of course, this repertory, the best way to learn how to practice this method, if it's considered as useful, it's the early Haydn. And it's very typical when you have the first violin playing a theme. Of course, the 3 members should be an independent trio. And there is no 3 people following one line, but it's more one leader inside of the trio who offers freedom to the first violin. So it's always the relation is some people with another one and not with the leading voice, not the 3 with the leading voice. Otherwise, there will be less accuracy in the playing, and less strong connection to stay autonomous. So we'll do a bit faster, and now, so the middle voice is in charge. You have really to search it. Yeah, search with the middle voice. Middle voice or lower. As you are playing the same, it's always when I speak about homorhythmic stuff. So you should go on playing with Philippe. Later on, you will be in charge because you will be the central part. So it sounds a bit abstract, but it forced me to search informations. And after the session, because I will show kind of mapping where you will have to play this thing, not today, but 16 times, and after you know exactly the score. Not from a work on table, but from the perception of events, which makes it more deep in your brain. Yeah, so answer you, when you are only 2, you play on the lower voice, and when you are 3, you play on the middle voice. So, of course, the quartet has to be used with this way of practicing. And I think it's even more, it will become efficient when the design of each beat is extremely precise. And again, it's why sometimes I'm asked with which repertoire we should start. I think maybe almost as studies. The little divertimento from Haydn, Opus 1 and 2, are very, very good place to learn how to play together in terms of the length of the notes, the articulation, because there is very few information, so you should really concentrate on the quality of the work you do. But I like Shostakovich, of course, very much. But we have more information. And of course, you will have even more in Schoenberg or Bartók or Lachenmann. But so, very good. So the idea now will be to go even faster, but we can go and go and go on, and we'll say, okay, where are we going? And how time it takes. But I just want to do a last tempo, asking the upper voice to be in charge, yeah, and go on collecting the information. So do you have the feeling, I will ask you, do you have the feeling that you know better the score than before?
More and more.
Yeah, and it takes time. It's why the occurrences of the playing will be a very important asset. A bit faster, and now Julita mainly, I mean, when you have parallel voices, Julita is in charge, or the upper voice. And maybe you will be surprised because I do not speak about bowings, but again, as stylistic questions, for me it refers to another knowledge and to other kind of decision. So I said 2 days ago to the quartet, we just had a little time shared together. Of course, when you have to take the bow twice for evident reasons, do it, but don't do it systematically. Also, the symbolic that represents the bowings in the past is now very far away from the music of the 20th century. Noble and Villain is far away. So just push and pull your string, and again, I see still some pressure changing. Because I did pull and push my string a lot in my life, I have the feeling I start to know it a bit. And I depend on it. My social, my professional life, and my artistic life, if there is one, depends on 4 times 90 centimeters. So I prefer to know them. Otherwise, I feel a bit alone and fragile. So go on pushing, and for example, I don't count, but you already pushed and pulled your string maybe 200 times now, which is a good experience. Faster, and Julita, you will be in charge when you are in parallel context, yeah? As a Kreuz, yeah? It's easier because we have more contact. But I think it's better to lose one note, and also it's part of how to memorize the score. Some people just, put their stones very close, and then put it further and further, and it helps them to learn the music by memory. So sometimes to leave the idea of seeing your score, your parts, to look at Veronique may provide a mistake, but I don't think mistakes should always be considered as bad. And I would say more an event or something which happened than a mistake. So try to look more at Veronique when you have the 3 of you. Also because you are further, yeah. Decide where you want to start, Julita.
60.
Why do you play the second less?
Well,
Is that Tim? It's yeah. Is that not too soon? So sometimes I say, what do you know about this music? But I'm sorry because it sounds very hard. But you know it by experience of recordings, but you don't know what you want to do with this music. And it's why I say I want to leave all the other aspects of your playing very far. And because I want your choices to be based on very strong experience of the text. You know?
Okay. So, question for you, because in Shostakovich I thought 3/4, and we already discussed on our first rehearsal. Yeah, maybe it's something like a waltz, but of course it's 20th century, so it shouldn't be maybe a simple answer. But for example, when we play, like you said, Haydn first quartets, and there is minuet, so we know that it should be like 1, 2, 3, 1.
Could we add a future?
I mean,
I just want to say it will be maybe. But now I will practice Haydn on the same way than Shostakovich, than everything. Yeah. So again, it's to build connection between the four of you,
okay.
and to know the text. And also because, you know, this, for example, this question about the waltz by Shostakovich, we have person better placed than us to speak about it, and especially musicologists, because they spend a lot of time to study all the scores, to read all the letters of Shostakovich. And it's a very interesting question, and if I'm once asked to take part in such a discussion, I will just bring my experience of player, who of course was kind of close from the Berlin Quartet and from the Druzhinin, and also, I mean, Christoph Meyer, we spoke about it, who did finish the nose of Shostakovich, so he knew him very well. A little story about this, you know, once Christoph Meyer was in Moscow, and he was visiting Shostakovich. And Shostakovich said, Christoph, do you want to play the Grossa Fuga, 2 pianos, because it was a tradition left and kept in Russia. And Christoph Meyer said, of course. So play the first violin and the viola. Oh, thank you, maestro. And I will play the cello and the second violin. Oh, thanks. And Shostakovich gave him the score, the only one. And Christoph said, but maestro, what will you do? I know them by memory. So just to say, you know, all this context, which is very important to know, and I will say at the end of this kind of exchange talk, that of course I just work on one aspect and possible approach of the quartet playing, but a lot of other questions are linked with the subject, including culture, study, analyze, but here, I don't know. And also it offers to have the same practice if you play a creation, you don't know anything about the score, you don't know anything about the music, and sometimes even the composer, they will say sometimes, what I wrote overtook my idea, you know, somehow. And I once with a composer, you know here, I spoke about rhetoric in his music, and he said, it's very interesting, I didn't think about it, but it works. So, and the waltz by Shostakovich is a very good question. It depends. It depends, and you will find 3 quartets, and they will all say something different. Yeah. So please now, just 2 equal notes, okay. And then you will, because of something you will learn from another one, or because things you will read somewhere, you will make a decision. But again, this decision will be based on the knowledge of the score. Okay. And for that, again, I refer to the difference between, I spoke rapidly with you, Lee Strasberg and John Strasberg. Lee Strasberg was teaching in the actor's studio, and he always asked the actors to find in their own feelings and or emotion or anxiety what could help them to consider Richard III as dangerous. And the son said, no, find it in the text. Just say the words and you will find the emotion. So, you know, it's really a very basic level, and somehow, like in chemistry, I want you to work on a very elementary system with absolutely no other things disturbing your attention to the collection of informations. So we finish. We finished? No, we didn't.
No.
So I go on with, I don't know, my tempo is maybe lost. Yeah. If I'm too fast or too slow, tell me, please. Yeah? Thank you very much. It's interesting. So of course we had also a very short discussion 2 days ago about the intonation, because it's easier to do this practice when we know about the intonation. But the intonation to be practiced in the quartet is a subject also of 2 hours. So maybe I will just say that the Cleveland Quartet said, and especially Efim Boyko said to us once, if all members play in tune, the quartet plays in tune. So, of course, you have to be somehow prepared to be able to play your score in tune. Even if I trust myself, then we have a practice to do to decide which kind of intonation we are using. And thank you, because it's already something, and it will develop after a while. So that's the principle. And you can go to the tempo. Shostakovich has asked for 1/16 for a bar. All the people who met Shostakovich said his metronome was kaput. But of course, as in Beethoven, we will always try to reach the tempo of the composer, again, to make a decision completely free of technical problems. So I did a little, but here I think really 1/16 is crazy. It's really crazy. So, and you will say, but okay, but it's a very long work. And I did a little calculation to say how many time we will need to prepare this movement. If you have 1 minute, up. There is different way to calculate. It depends if you work with the old metronome system. So the first time, as we have 88 beats, 3 bars, no, 88 bars for 3 beats, it does 264 beats. If I play 50, it takes 316 minutes 80 in decimal, not seconds, which is 5,28 minutes in decimal. If I convert 28 to seconds, it makes 5 minutes 17. So, and I did it. It's very simple to make automatization of this calculation. And so to play from bar 1 to bar 65, it lasts 36 minutes and 10 seconds. So which sounds for me not too much. Of course, the movement itself is a bit longer, but still, it's another one where it is. Okay. So because some people now, with you have new metronomes, I'm still a kind of traditional one, go from 50 to 60, 70, 80, and so on. So it's a bit faster. It takes only 35 minutes. And if I did the calculation for the rest of the movement, we have 334 bars in 3 beats. which makes 2 hours 22 minutes 39 seconds. Then 161 bars with 2 beats in a tempo, which is the third part because the bar equal the bar, it's about 40 minutes. And then it finished with 216 bars in the tempo of the third movement, which represents about 51 minutes and 26 seconds. And then you have the cadence of the cello with some few bars with pizzicato. Altogether, I gently had 10 minutes. So it takes 4 hours with the metronome. But of course, we have to do it without the metronome to be sure that the connections are not based on the metronome, but between the musicians. So to prepare such a movement, I say to prepare the construction, it lasts only 8 hours. It's what I say, and I'm expecting a quartet who would accept to prepare the quartet with me, and I think the 8th of Shostakovich is 12 hours, because it's a short one, and very simple one somehow. There is less information than in the 9th. And it offers me the idea that if I am asked to play a piece, I know how many time I need to prepare it. Then the discussions is welcome. In the same time, between the rehearsal, I have time to make other kind of approach, like analyze, searching, looking at some articles about the score. Now I can say, okay, I can accept this concert or not. And very often I see people just fighting against a score with a very, very strong emotion, very happy to practice it and do not know how to go to some results. And I think it's tiring, it's difficult, and it's a bad experience. Again, decided to express this principle in that way is because of the speed of our society today. And our predecessors had more time also to stay together and to let the experience of the previous moment to spread in their brain. And now myself, when I'm quitting a group, I directly jump on my telephone to know if there is not a new message or new information. And again, it's known that there is a bad interference with the process of knowledge. So, 8 hours. Do you think the Fifth Quartet of Shostakovich 9 deserves 8 hours? After 8 hours, the rehearsals could start because somehow we are before the rehearsals. So, is there any question about this aspect of the practice? Because I have some other things to say afterwards, but because I guess there are some musicians here. Maybe how do we do with the clarinet? So of course, when we practice with wind players, or if you work with an ensemble where there is only players, we have limitation because of the tempo and the tiredness of the mask. Yeah, it's a bit, but it works too. It works too, and it's, for example, very important for them to understand because it's not a group with 4 times the same instruments. Very important for them to be used to play on the attack of another one. And it helps them a lot. I mean, I've tried and they said finally it works also for us. And so I think it's always possible. So if you have no question, I can ask a question myself. And do that work also for new music? Yes, I think, or I am sure, but I will advise to first, as Claude Balif did in 1949 on his third quartet, to put 3 lines with the rhythm of your colleagues. Just the rhythm is enough to help the process of memorizing what they play. But we'll practice it exactly in the same way. So this first practice is the same for any kind of repertoire.
Okay. I have 2 questions for you.
Good.
First, you count the time based on the developing with metronome, and you said that we should repeat it without metronome. So also starting from 50 till 160.
Yeah.
But just
Exactly
without
the same way.
Okay.
I have to add, but that's another subject. I propose normally when you are in the process without metronome, when you climb, to try first, because now you did vibrate. I forgot to say no vibrato, please. I forgot. Sorry. to start to care about the quality of the attacks, then to add a little vibrato and dynamics, and then to cherish the string. And finally, it's very strange because things appear very naturally without any effort, and the only thing what we miss then is musical choices. But Arthur Horace said, when you have done that job, you are already behind the music. So your musical choices are already done. And but what sounds for me very important is also you avoid all this discussion. And we had, I don't know if Tony remember, but we had discussion, and I was myself, comment dire, piégé, yeah, because once we came back to a score, I don't know if it was with you, but, and I said, please, could we change this time? Because I always say that I prefer like this. And one of my colleagues put somewhere in the score, Guy prefers, because it was behind two solutions, Guy preferred the A solution. And I said that day that I always prefer the B solution. So very often when we don't know the score, we defend ideas which had no, real fundament. Just kind of, maybe because what we did here yesterday or the person we met 2 days ago. And now I think after this practice, the choices are based on, again, this knowledge, as John Strasberg said, on the text, even if it's not enough to go on stage, because you will not play the first of Haydn as you play Shostakovich, of course. But the construction is done, and I would say the architecture of the music is possible to play together with freedom, because connections are already on your head. And if I say it's possible to be, I would say, always together, and I told you already, you say no. If, for example, answer make a strange rubato, I'm not sure I will follow her. And I said, if I serve you a glass of white wine with a little wire, transparent one on the glass, and when you will take your glass, I pull the wire, your hand will follow your glass. And it's not an intelligent decision. It's just, again, just because you do that. And it's possible to follow your viola player or the second violin, just because the connections are strong. Because it's in the part of the brain where decisions are taken faster than the conscious. And it's why we need to repeat.
Yeah, and second question, because in this music is very, really based on the strong architectural, let's say, aspect, like this counterpointing and so on. It's based on fast tempo, and final effect to the audience should be, oh wow, they could play fast and strong. Okay, but what about, for example, more intimate music, like in slower tempo, with more aspects than just structure? Because, for example, in romantic slow movements from romantic period for string quartet, we have more singing and very simple counterpointing. What about that? Should we also rehearse in this way?
Yeah. So the problem of when you have long slurs in a slow tempo is that we have to cut them. So we should be extremely conscious that we are not working with the wish of approaching the results. So, but what is very important, as you said, when the material is more just simply contrapuntic or slower, it's to do the same number of repetition. Very often I've heard, but I will go on with the answer. I've heard quartets where 3 movements were quite good and the slow movement very weak because they just played it twice because it's possible to make first reading. And it was not in the brain, it was nowhere. So, and we will do the same work, but there is another aspect that I will not develop today because it's more, it's another subject. It's about the sound. We will try to all provide a sound with a lot of upper harmonics. And so the idea is to tense the vibrating part of the string. And it's why when you see all the violinists like Heifetz and all these guys, when they did photo for representation, the violin is very high. Then the bow falls on the bridge, and it makes a more nasal sound. So we touch another subject. We'll start from that sound all together, and we will also, if a part of the fact that at the beginning the slurs are cut, we will always play legato as much as possible, and play always giving right, when I say information comes from, to the person changing articulation. So if I play ti, la, li, la, li, and ti, the person playing ti, la, li, la, I know that the entrance leads. When I say leads, it's a bad word, sorry, because I say it's a reference. I don't like the idea of leading in a quartet. So, but the process will be the same. Just as I will say, all the quartet should, if you understand the idea of this practice, to be far from emotion, to build connections. All quartet will find is on receipt, how I do it, and it should be adapted to the repertory, clearly. But it's also where it's possible. The only thing, don't miss numbers of repetition. Not versus repetition, because in French it's the same word, répétition, répétition. No, of repetition. To have it in your brain. And why this nasal sound? That's another subject, but I can touch it rapidly. And for that, you need to look at the old maestro. If you look at Berlinski, and some cello teacher ask their students to look regularly to Berlinski. He plays notes of 20 seconds with one bow. And we were lucky enough to play with him 3 times. The sound of Berlinski when it's in the bass, nobody has ever heard it because he was covered by the sound of his colleagues. And when you look at Norbert Brenin, he used a lot of bow. A lot of bow. In the Days and the Maiden, it Rotite, Holly, Hello. So I can't think it's possible to have a central sound when you play with such a bow. So we start with a very nasal sound, all of us, which I call now the root sound. And then, further and further, we'll define how how we release tension, how much bow we use, to no more have 4 completed sounds, but 4 different sounds, to have a very nice picture and very clear and very transparent. But it will be about the same idea, but we have to add this aspect of the sound. And it was a dream once, and with the technology, it's maybe now possible to record at the same time a quartet, experimented quartet, when you have the sound of the 4 people, and then you can also have in the same time the sound of each person. But it's sure that it's never written to have a nice sound in a quartet. You need 4 nice sounds. And I can re-say that the sound of Berlinski, if I try to reproduce the motion, was lovely, but some people say it was ugly. Extremely nasal, like a stone. And the fact why I say lovely, because the fact to like it or not is just a question of culture. And when you speak with person working on stones, they prefer the art stone than this Pierre de France that you can grave with this. You can already do a little angel. And in Brittany, it's more difficult. So, it's just another material. So, but that's maybe, I was obliged to overtake your question. So good. No question? So, I continue. So, how say so? It seems so. As I've said, it sounds interesting for me to be able to define the time you need to prepare a piece, and it's really what we expect from a craftsman. And I liked once a quartet to be able to make an estimate quote when a work is requested. And it's very strange because when you ask a craftsman to do something, I don't know, to paint your sleeping room or to do a new cabin, you want to know the price. And musicians, they just fight against their work. it's possible to organize ourselves to know what we need at the time. Then, of course, we need other matters to prepare the score. And I will so come back to the research of the differentiation of tone quality. And it's very important. I ask you the question if, as I've said, 4 complete tones are necessary to construct the sound of the quartet. It's very important also to think about the hierarchy between the consonants. If I ask all of you to say de, I will hear de. Now with your mask it's difficult. If I ask you, one of you to say que, the que will appear more to the audience than the de, and the de will disappear. So it's the same in the quartet. The consonants of the cello may kill the attacks of the violin. If you play, for example, Opus 18, number 2, it's very important, especially because we play on metal string. I have to say, I think our metal strings are not nice. It's why we need to make a big effort to make them, in the same time, speaking, but not hard. I think I prefer the good string in the sound. By itself, it sounds better. So it's why, so when I see people playing a metal string with no consideration of this difficult sound, I think it's a danger. So that's the thing you should really work on. It's, did my consonants kill the consonant of the other? And yeah, there's also the work of intonation, and as I've said, it takes hours. But first you have to play in tune, all of you. But what we are used, it's really to build a grid, and we speak about intonation from the time of Pythagoras, and I will say it's impossible to play in tune. It doesn't exist, in fact. But you have to make a compromise with each choice, and which will define the sound of the quartet. I can also spend time on the score to explain which was our way to work intonation. So we can refer to one of the persons who spoke more about it in the classical fields is Eberhard Feltz, and he has a system with good quints, and you have to choose, because of major third being little, if you play with the upper strings or the low one. And I think it's very difficult. And all the person who followed his system changed it a bit. We were more used to build a grid, and for example, because we were bored having always a C too low on C major tone, we finally made very often little quints. So the idea is to be able, in a tonality, to build a grid where you know exactly where the pitches are and to know where you have to do compromise. That could be also very well organized. It takes time, but it's completely necessary to build the sound of the quartet. Without intonation, there is no sound in a quartet. I don't speak about mistakes, which happens, but this idea of having a grid. And also some tricks, because you speak about other repertory. When you play Webern, when you play Schoenberg, or even Brahms, you can approach the score and playing just pizzicato. It's very more simple to understand the construction. And I have also a kind of personal memory. Once we played the Brahms quintet in Stavelot, and as an encore, because we did practice it with the clarinet player, we played the beginning of the slow movement, which is tricky, you know, with the duolen, triplets without first beat, it's a bit unstable, and we practiced it pizzicato. And as the audience is in the pub, then in the cellar afterwards, we didn't say what we'll play, we said we will tell them afterwards. And we played Brahms, the beginning of the slow movement of the quintet, pizzicato. And a journalist came to us, oh, it was an extremely interesting encore. What was that? And we said, dear, it was the slow movement you heard 20 minutes before. She was extremely frustrated, and we had a very bad review. But it's true that it doesn't look at Brahms. And for example, also in Webern, to understand the line, it's very important. So there's also tricks like that to how to approach a score. Again, what I should really insist, everything I try to transmit is just the inner heritage of my teachers, but I think nowadays we should make it more clear and have little words or principle or process which I would say save us from the distraction of the life, the divertissement. I don't know, we say also divertissement in English? Yeah, the divertissement is good in French because it means changing your way and not amusing yourself. So entertainment, the translation doesn't work finally. Divertir is asking someone to change his way. Vertir, yeah. So very good. And there is a lot of tricks. So today I just approach this aspect, and I would like once to share with some quartets. I do. I mean, all other tricks to practice fast. So, of course, when this technique has been adopted, each ensemble will make its own, as I've said, adapting it to the repertoire you work on. I insist on the fact to repeat the things. It's very important, even if the tempo is slow or the writing is more simple. And all this must be complemented by contextual, historical, and stylistic research. Otherwise, you are lost, for which we must rely on the work of musicologists and the recordings of predecessors and colleagues. It's the only way to have references. But at the same time, I will share with you a personal conviction. The memories of my teachers are deeply engraved in my mind, and I seek every day, quoting them almost daily, to pass on their inheritance. I have received the inheritance I have received. Yeah, sorry. I only try to adapt the mode of communication and the wording of the current context. But what remains me driving force is the memory of their onomatopoeia. They were really speaking, not, as I said, be careful the consonant, but ham, Philippe, ham, not two, ham. And moving a lot. It was extremely expressful. Their eloquent gestures, I remember Nissel dancing like a young guy. He was already 66. He had a key in the pocket, you know. And it was like Monsieur Orchestra, you know. But such an energy, and we felt completely guilty because he had more energy than us, 40 years younger. And we said, oh. Their lyrical soaring, and those precious little phrases that remain the basis for my feeling of legitimacy in the transmission of the younger generation. For example, Drugin said once to us, in the interval, I'm not interested in the distance, but in the way. And it changed my life. Or also, when you speak physically, Philippe, yes, little here, but big there. And you stay with these words, and it stays in your mind. But again, then I was looking at the sea with 20 pounds, call my family, and finito. And then you have 2 hours to think about little here, yes, but big there. And now it's, hello? Yes, we are disturbed. So, but for me, as a conclusion, I think that repertoire and concerts offer us, without any doubt, the greatest lessons and are our best guides. It's why I advise you to be able to learn repertory in a fast way. So now, if there is any question.
Yeah, I'm looking for this, like for playing with piano, about the intonation and also the sound, looking for the common sound. Do you advise the same method, like in trio or
Piano trio? It depends on the pianist. If the pianist accepts, yes, but in the same time, the presence of the piano is a very good guarantee of building the connections. Also because the attacks of the piano are extremely precise. So I think when I say where is the reference, it's more to the piano. And again, I speak about this construction. I don't speak musically. So it offers us a lot and a very big comfort. But also for the intonation, for example, in a piano trio, if the pianist agrees to do that work with us, it's helpful for us But it's also possible for some passages to work only 2 strings. And even when why I say intonation, there is always, especially when you are a quartet and piano quintet, should we use well-temperated intonation, which I'm sorry I want to say bad temperated intonation, or harmonic intonation. And then we have to make a choice, and I always propose the ensembles sometimes to have a session only on the strings. Of course, you have to choose which passages to define their intonation harmonic. And then, kind of naturally, we will adapt ourselves to the intonation of the piano, which also changes sometimes, because there is different way, as you know, to tune a piano. But of course, it helps, but sometimes it's not needed for the pianist himself, or herself. So, but I do it with a pianist on sonata, and it's very efficient, especially on new pieces, because you spend 3 hours, but after 3 hours you know what's about, and you are able to play from the beginning to the end without too much doubt. And to confess, I'm practicing myself also, and recently differently, but like this, because I start playing all the notes at 50, without any rhythm, without any gaps, without any articulation. And I go to 120 and 140. And to prepare a movement, it's pom, 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 and through the score. Of course, I will share the movement in 2 or 3 parts, because to accumulate experience, the time between 2 occurrences shouldn't be too long. But it will work. And then I start again from 50, very slow, and with the articulation. And it's very fast. So I think it's possible for any kind of score, but should be always adapted about with piano or without, with wind or without, and which tempo and which kind of articulation. Voila. I have to say, I like music also.
Thank you to the
Yeah, thank you.